what is it like to tell the story of your own city? No, I didn't tell the story of my city. What's it like to discover your city in a different way? I think that was kind of fun, to be able to sit back and have conversations with people that I know and familiar with, but to talk to them in a different way, that was kind of cool. I hadn't sat down and talked to Shannon, President Hardin, that way. Intimate and different. And getting into Kay's head for a moment, that was brilliantly scary. I think Kay saw something that the community has been paying attention to now, and I'm glad Kay is part of just this community here in Columbus, and my friend.
Like, I don't feel like Olly Wake was something that I came up with, whatever. I feel like it's something that I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have to do this.
Right. Yeah. We're there, so let's talk about it.
Are we filming? Okay, good.
What was sort of that inspired you to go down the Olly Awake path?
It's funny because it actually took me like a year and a half to figure out like what that was, but because I couldn't figure out why I was like so driven to do this thing. But then when it was coming out as non-binary, like a year later, I was like, oh, of course, because like when I started to realize that my whole life has been kind of like ruled by these concepts of gender, because I came from like a conservative, like homogenous background where like clothes were a way of basically expressing control or expressing like what you're supposed to be or what you're supposed to do with your life.
Everyone's world
is like that.
Is about gender, right? Like even we don't want it to be,
yeah.
but that's just the way that we've created it. So I think it's an interesting thing. But you came from a world it's heightened, I think, in terms of like those paradigms.
Yeah, I think that it was attached to other things.
Yeah.
Was what I realized was that like gender, which not that I had not realized this before, but just like my personal experience with gender was that of control and like oppression in a way that was like rather than like an expressive form. I think for a lot of people, even if gender rules their lives, they may still find like wonderful ways to like express themselves through their gender. Whereas like most of my life up until recently, I felt like gender was something that I like had to kind of like work around in a way, I never really felt like, especially before, like, I don't even know if you'd call like a non-binary like movement or like understanding or blossoming or whatever, when we basically got the language that we needed to describe what it was to be non-binary. I think that before that I didn't have like any understanding of where I fit in to the spectrum, because I never really felt like a man, and I never really felt like, I don't know. I never
the other
really
side of that.
with the binary, yeah. So.
Yeah. It's interesting how powerful language is, and how sometimes we are also, as a society, inflexible with language. But once we become flexible with language, like how much it opens up, right?
Oh my gosh, it changes everything.
Yeah.
I mean, in many ways, Olly Wake is language just like put into action as well. I mean, what we're doing is just saying that these clothes are like gender neutral, gender equal, as we call them. And I mean, because of that, that means we have to design them in a specific way. They have to be intentionally built from the ground up to be a thing.
Yeah, like we understand whether a construct of binaries or not, we understand language is powerful. And so, I think what's great is as you are very intentional about the language you use in terms of describing the clothes, right? You just actually said it. I'm trying not to say it, so you say it again. But gender equal, yeah. Right? So I think that's powerful in language. But also as you identify yourself, right? Like, can we explore that just a little bit in terms of like using pronouns?
Yeah, because
like,
I use they, them pronouns.
Right, and so how does that, in the same space, like that, there's power in that language. Like before that moment of being able to say, I identify with these pronouns, you were sort of, I'm lost, but did you feel lost?
Yeah. Like, I think so. I think lost is a great word to use. I think like, especially, I mean, I remember when I was growing up, my dad would, whenever he'd write like, especially like birthday cards or Christmas cards or whatever, he's like, whenever they'd say like, you're gonna grow into a fine young man, that was always like this like huge like cringe moment, you know, of like, oh, this is like not right, this doesn't feel right. And I think that all of that weight just like carried into like those like pronouns, you know, and now it's so funny now that I've been using non-binary pronouns for, God, I don't know, like a year and a half or something like that. It has been longer than that. The pandemic, 2020, it's definitely been like 2.5 years. I think that that's helped me, like now thinking of going, like trying to think of going back into binary pronouns is like impossible for me to like comprehend, kind of. And even at like work, most people still use like he, him pronouns for me. Because I think they still are learning how to use they, them pronouns. And that's just like that's been kind of a thing that I've been working through a little bit more.
You know, it's interesting. So again, thinking about these binaries, you know, I think Olly Awake to me represents a lot of things, and I have a tendency to unpack a lot. So I'm going to unpack all this stuff, right? Right, like even in the name, right? Like Olly Awake. When I think about sort of people waking up, right? Like waking up to language and realizing the power in language and the power in clothing that allows people to be seen, right? So you just talked about like being in the workplace, right? And traditionally in the workplace, you walk in, you've got your button-down shirts or your dresses or whatever it is, and there's this binary to clothing, right? And so here's Olly Awake, where you're deconstructing that and sort of, again, intentionally building it from the ground up. And I think that's beautiful, right? So like, I know that like I love wearing my tunic to work, and I put on a pair of jeans with it, and
you have the OG one.
I do, and I love it. But it breaks down like that, again, that binary, right? Like, so someone, when you walk through the workplace, someone like doesn't have to look at an article of clothing and ascribe one or the other gender to it, which I think is powerful, right? So now I'm walking through the workplace empowered.
There's power in design, because I feel like design is like the next kind of like expression of like we talk about like words being like one like super powerful form of expression, and the design is like bringing like basically words into the real world as like a physical concept a lot of times. So like, I mean, even here in like, you know, Beautiful Bake Me Happy, it's like, you know, like Letha's expression of like gluten-free and all that. I mean, like those are just words that then become real things that people can eat, and that's like so powerful.
So as you think about sort of the next for Olly Awake, like what do you see the next being?
I think the next thing for us is always going to be just like, how can we push that bar to the next level? Like we've had an understanding about what our company is and what it's supposed to do in the world, and like we've understood that trajectory. And I think for us that means it's constantly figuring out like what the next place that we're like pushing. And because I think right now we've gotten to a place where people are starting to understand what we're doing. Because at the beginning people thought we were nuts and it was like totally weird, you know, like, so like they just didn't understand, you know, what gender neutral clothing and androgynous clothing, or as we call it, gender equal clothing is. And now that more companies are doing that, more, especially I really appreciate more like small queer startups are starting to do that. I think that it's just helping us to take to the next level, so it really becomes more of an opportunity for us to like expand our expression of that idea. Really.
Well, I mean, I think from where I've been sitting, I definitely see the impact that Olly Awake is having, I think, in industry, as people are literally having conversations about gender equal clothing and what it means. And I'm just excited to see the rest of the journey.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
I think it was most exciting, interesting, intimidating, and thrilling, enthralling, all the words, when I got to sit down with President Hardin, Shannon. You know, it was the first time that he and I were connecting in a couple of new roles. It was the first time that he and I were sitting down connecting, with me being CEO of the Pride Fund, with me leading a new nonprofit organization here in Central Ohio, which is, directly in his constituency as president of Columbus City Council. But it was the first time that he and I sat down as queer identities, as Black men, during Pride Month, who are now both fathers. And as we think about the future of our community and what that means for two gay, queer Black men who are fathers to sit down and connect and have a conversation about community, economic development, about life. That's powerful. That is new. That was a first for our city here in Columbus, probably even most potentially for our country. That two openly professional queer Black men who are leading organizations and leading communities in the 14th largest city in the country had the opportunity and the pride to sit down and be able to hold that conversation. That was pretty powerful for me, and I hope just as powerful for Shannon. There's so many questions that I have. I think representation matters. Yeah. As we sit here, two Black men. It looks like two Black men, right, on the outside there. Fathers sit in the gay queer space. Yeah. I think that so many intersectional sort of stories there, and I believe again in representation mattering. What inspired you to step up into this role of public service?
Well, I think mentors really have a huge influence in a lot of our paths. For me, my mentor was the first African-American mayor of the city of Columbus, Michael Coleman. I used to be his liaison to the faith community, to the LGBTQ community, and also to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I remember on a flight back from Tampa, a conference we had gone to, Mayor Coleman started talking to me about what's next. And this is after working 5 years in his office. And he said, Shannon, it's time for you. You've reached your ceiling with me in this office. It's time for you to step up and be and run for office. And it was always something that I was intrigued by. I love local government. I said, well, Mayor, I'm too liberal for the city because I'm young and I'm Black. And he's like, bro, I know that you're Black. I can see that you're Black. And I'm like, well, no, Mayor, I'm young, I'm Black, and I'm gay. And I'm just too liberal for this city. And he paused and he was like, Shannon, that's only an issue if it's a problem for you. He's like, that's the exact reason why I'm having this conversation with you, because Columbus needs to see itself in its representatives. And we're becoming younger, we're becoming more progressive. And to your point, representation matters. And at that point, we had an openly gay council member, but not an openly gay Black person in elected office. And that was the first time it clicked that these things that make up, these intersections that make up my life and who I am, are actually opportunities for me to connect with the residents that we serve. I mean, Columbus is 915,000 people, and that matters.
Yeah, it's interesting because I left Columbus for a number of years with sort of a similar thought. I was like, I thought that I was too liberal for Columbus at the time, and I moved out to San Francisco, and I was there for 6 years. And towards the end of my time in San Francisco, I started thinking, I want to have an impact in the community more so than I felt that I was having. And I started reaching out to city council and figuring out, how I could serve on commissions there and like all these different things. And it was, and then I felt like being in San Francisco, I was too conservative, right? By the time that I was getting into it, I was like, oh, maybe more politics is conservative. And I came back to Columbus because I think it's similar to what Mayor Mike was saying, and I value sort of just his experience and what he did in the city for so much. But I remember thinking, okay, maybe I do go back to Columbus to help change happen in that community, because I do believe, and I did believe, and I see it happening now. That the city was ripe for that change, right? Exactly what Mayor Coleman was saying was that it was time to see different types of representation. And I came back to the city with the full intent of helping create Columbus.
Yes.
And it was, and I always joke about it because another connection of ours is the Create Columbus Commission and sort of that network there, and I sit here and I see that you have been a part of that creation of change in this community. And very thoughtful and intentional, and I think in that
well,
way.
I would argue that the underlyings of the community were already there. We were that progressive community. We were becoming that. We just didn't have it elevated or represented. And so there were the underpinnings of it. What I think where we were coming back in was we were starting to get glimpses of Columbus's future, but we realized that that all of us weren't 100% a part of it.
Yeah.
And if we could just take some leaps, some steps to really expand the definitions of inclusion and diversity, then we really could shape a city that was for all of us. And I think that that's been the process, and that you and I have been a part of over the last half decade or so.
And I feel like I see it. I feel like I see it. Is that right? But I feel like I feel it too, right?
Yes.
I think as we go around the city, there's a different energy. There's clearly a different look of our community. And since I've come back, or in those last couple of years, we are now the 14th largest city in the country versus the 15th largest, right? And we will only continue to grow, change, and evolve. And I think, I often say to people, we are at this moment when we are seeing changes in leadership across the city, which is the right thing. Again, going back to Mayor Mike, I don't know that he was thinking that you would be city council president this early, but he was thinking you get in there, right? But it was the right thing at the right time. And I'll ask a question in sort of that space. I hear people say, right, the right leader for the right moment. I think you were and are the right leader for the right moment right now, right? Like last year, as we went through the uprising, as we continue to think about LGBT equality and the Equality Act, do you feel like you've been prepared? Like, I don't know. That's a sort of a, like we're all learning at the same time, but like, do you feel like you were the right person at the right time?
I'm a person of strong faith, and I believe that we are positioned for moments in time. And this last 12 months has certainly been a moment in time, not just for our city, but really for our country, where we are struggling with who we are and who we want to be. I think we were coming off of a period of long comfort as a community and as a country, but the comfort was disguising that it wasn't really comfortable for everybody. And so being in this position, being the first openly gay council president, being the third black council president, in line behind some huge figures, Jerry Hammond, who sat in this seat, who was the father of black politics in Columbus, then Mayor Coleman, it allowed me to be in a position where when we had to have these tough conversations last year, when we had to go through what we went through after George Floyd's murder, that I was well positioned to lead and lead and speak up, not because of it's my personality to be out there, or truthfully, I never considered myself the protest type. I was the sit around the table, let's figure it out type. But the time dictated and demanded that the person in this seat, if they had the ability, and that they speak up and that they step up and that we really move the ball forward. And I think, going back to where we were last June, when folks took to the street in Columbus, and I went down with Congresswoman Beatty and Commissioner Boyce to see for myself what was happening in the streets, and also to stand in solidarity with folks who were demanding real change in how communities police themselves, especially around black folks. And myself getting pepper sprayed, it again allowed me a closer connection, but also a platform to say, this is what we're talking about. This is the issue, that even my title doesn't protect my black skin from the issues that my residents are going through. And I think all of these things have built for us to move forward some really sweeping policy changes pertaining to policing, more than you can do in a normal political time. We were able to leapfrog, and I'm very, very proud of that, with also being aware that there's so much more work to do. And hopefully what we have done is galvanize a more engaged electorate, a more engaged people, a more engaged queer community, a more engaged Black and brown community to say, this is not perfect, and we can make it better.
Yeah. I think that's, and I agree. I think it has been, to me, in the tragedy of the moment, the pandemic and murders and just the world sort of waking up to it, there has been such a beautiful coming together of people, I believe, at the same time, to move policy, politics, and hearts and minds forward for the Black and brown community, but also for the queer community. And I do believe, again, sort of that right time, right people. I think if we had different leaders sitting in these seats and doing the things that they would have traditionally been doing, would we have taken the same leaps forward? I don't know. I would venture to say not.
Well, we still have a ways to go, because we think about the time that we're in and being positioned for the moment. The real moment, what it is Columbus is preparing to grow and grow by a lot. Because Columbus is still, in my opinion, somewhat of a blank canvas. No one will tell you no, but it doesn't mean that it's already there, which means go do it. If you're missing that thing here, if this space is not all the way conducive to who you are, then help us create it, because I promise you there's somebody out there that is looking for it too. They just don't have the energy and and the experience, or even sometimes the vision. They know that there is more. They know that they want to belong, but they need the community to be there. And so I'm excited about the folks, and that's why it's really neat to see Stonewall in its a new iteration under your leadership, really growing and creating that space for folks, and seeing these other organizations who are really spreading themselves out and putting their chest out and being proud of who they are and owning spaces like that. That is really the next chapter of Columbus's growth, is really creating space and allowing folks to be creative, open, and do the cool stuff that will grow and make us a better city.
And I think you are 100% correct. I think it is, and space means so much, whether that's physical space or sort of the notion of space, being seen and heard.
Yes.
I think the work with Stonewall and the work with the Pride Fund, ultimately that's what we're working to do, is to uplift the community, to tell people's stories, but to ultimately allow them the space to tell their own stories.
Yes.
Right, and I think the opportunity to sit here and have a conversation with you about, the intersectional aspects of who you are, and hearing how you're helping lead the city through change right now, is phenomenal. Well, I'm excited to be a part of the city as it changes with you and under your guidance and help. So thank you so much for all you're doing. Thank you. Sitting down and talking to Letha Pugh, someone that I respect in such an immeasurable way, that was moving. Even when I stepped into the positions that I'm sitting in, right, both of them, right, like it was more that I'm doing this because I believe and understand that other people need to see it, or like they just, right, like no, and so I understand that, right, but it takes a while to work yourself up to the place to feel comfortable to even share, right, because that, stepping into a CEO role or an executive director role, that's ultimately sharing yourself with everybody, right, and so I think it takes a moment for us to allow ourselves to share ourselves with other people, but as I go down this path, I want to explore it. Like you have done that to me, I think, through your journey with Preston's and with Bake Me Happy. Like you were literally sharing yourself with other people. How did you get to that place? I mean, through food, like I mean, or.
And I didn't start in food. I started in healthcare.
Yeah.
And it was an easy transition for me because people need to eat. So food and nutrition, all that is kind of encompassed in nursing to begin with. The nursing piece gave me empathy. I was one of those people that had to learn to be an empathetic listener when I listened to patients and things like that. I didn't grow up with that skill.
Okay.
But I've always liked business.
Would never believe it.
Oh, yeah.
Like I would, like I mean.
I could rob you.
And
Get
be
my
fine.
car and go, you know.
But like I would never believe it. So yeah.
I hear you. But I've always been an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I would earn a food stamp doing things for people.
Yeah.
I'd buy 10 packs of Now and Laters. I got bused about an hour away. I'd sell each pack for $1.
Yeah.
But I would take the money, and like I've shared before, I was helping buy dishwashing liquid and groceries and things like that. So the business piece has always been there, and I think being able to do the business and in healthcare, when I owned the home care agency, really, that's where I really cut my teeth. That's where I learned, I should have an accountant. I should, always pay your taxes on time. Those types of things. When Bake Me Happy came into play, my wife is an amazing baker. And when I kind of looked at, okay, well, this town is big enough for more than one of anything. And there's a couple of existing gluten-free bakeries here, but let's throw our hat in. And so the money from the home care sales what kind of funded this project. And I call them projects because I'm kind of in and out. I don't bake, I don't make burgers, but behind the scenes, I'm very anal with paperwork and contracts and accounting. So, it's all kind of worked out. And then the community piece of it just came like authentically.
Yeah, but I think even though you're not in the kitchen baking or cooking, you're still you shared yourself with us by saying your wife in terms of your partner here at Bake Me Happy, right? Like working and doing that. I think there's that personal intimacy of self that people just sometimes don't even bring into the space, right? Like that's one of the reasons why, hopefully with even the storytelling we're doing with Pride Fund is that we're allowing people to feel comfortable telling their full story.
Gotcha.
And that to me is that there is a great, wonderful story behind Bake Me Happy and what you do in the community, as you just started to talk about. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about it.
Well, it's interesting. About 3 years into Bake Me Happy, I went to Wendy and said, I don't know if this is it for me. I don't know if coming here, working like a dog all day, and then going home, and it's hard work here. And I said we had to make an agreement that I would kind of be the face, and that I wanted to be engaged and do more things in the community. And people were trying to engage me, and I didn't really know what to do with that at the time. I did get a business coach, and we just kind of worked through helping me kind of siphon out what was important to me. Don't say yes to everything, and so that's all been a part of this too. But really, it has really been authentic because we could not have this business and be in the closet, or because we also have a daughter who, this is one of those businesses where sometimes it's all hands on deck. She's been in here, scooping things too. So I also think that it's very important that people see themselves in teachers and even at the bank and the grocery store, and having a small business. I think it's important that people see that I can be involved in the community and do things and be helpful, and I can also come here and work behind the counter. I can also be on a panel with a bunch of folks from the city. So it's been a good experience. It's been a wide swath of things I've been involved with, but the community is important to me. It's always been important to me. I just feel like I have a little bit more of a soapbox now to stand on.
And it's interesting. I think as we think about sort of what do you call them, influencers, right? We'll use the term influencer because that's the language of the folks these days. That idea of having a soapbox and being able to use that to do good, whatever good is. I've been privileged enough to live in the city with you and to see how you've used that to do good. Do you think that that's going to be a continued sort of through line and ethos in terms of all of the things, right? With Bake Me Happy and Preston's, like, you know, that idea of ensuring that you're using that platform to do good?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that I am still trying to figure out what my calling is, but those are avenues through which I want to kind of funnel that energy, because I think there can be a balance between I am what you call a conscious capitalist. I think you can I'm okay with making money. I give away a lot of money, but I also think that it can be done in a way that everybody wins.
Yeah.
And that's always been my thing. How can we all win?
Signal, but I just want to say thank you for taking this time to sit down and connect. But I think it just your conscious capitalism and conscious capitalist, however you want to put it, is seen and I think truly appreciated. I think not only here in Columbus, I think across the country and community. You know, and I can say that because I've had the opportunity of traveling a little bit for the last couple of months, talking to other individuals who are doing the same thing and putting the same sort of intentional thought and ensuring that not only are they doing good business, but they're doing good community. So thank you so much for all you do.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you.
I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It's weird, I'm trying to contextualize the feeling of traveling the country, getting to meet amazing people, to just simply ask them questions about why they do what they do, simply in an effort to uplift their stories. Like that is privilege and power and anxiety and excitement all wrapped up into one. You know, when we started this journey a year ago, thinking that we were just going to simply write stories, let people take an opportunity to share their stories from, you know, pen to paper or again, keyboard to finger. That was something simple. That was doable. I think the moment it became we're getting on a plane and meeting people where they are, that became a little bit anxiety producing, I think, for myself. You know, when people allow you into their spaces, into their hearts, into their minds, there's a level of intimacy and trust that you have to nurture and hold on to. And I think that's exactly what this journey was, an exploration of intimacy and trust in a community that is often not seen, whose stories are often not supported and told, in a community that is often silent about their full identities. You know, so to be able to travel to some amazing cities across this wonderful country and to connect with some just dynamic people doing brilliant things for a community, that's powerful. And if nothing more, I hope that this wild, crazy ride that we all took together sheds a little light on who we are as a people, as a community. We are just like everyone else. We have passions and desires just like everyone else. But ultimately, we just want to be successful and seen just like everyone else. Our words of pride aren't any different than any other community.